What happens when a powerful millionaire in a sky blue suit suddenly collapses on the road, and the only one who comes to his rescue is a 5-year-old girl? This is not just a story of wealth or power. It's about innocence, courage, and a tiny heart that saved a giant life. Stay with us, because this heart-melting story will leave you believing in miracles and remind us all that kindness has no age. William had lived his whole life as a man people admired. At 35, he was a billionaire CEO who commanded attention wherever he went. Employees respected him, partners admired him, and the world saw him as untouchable. In meetings, his voice was strong. In deals, his handshake was firm. He was the kind of man people whispered about, powerful, successful, and feared by rivals. But power could not protect him from the weakness creeping into his body that day. The mall parking lot stretched wide and quiet, the golden light of late afternoon spilling across the concrete. William's polished shoes clicked sharply as he walked, his expensive sky blue suit glowing softly in the sunlight. He carried himself with pride, but deep inside, something felt wrong. A strange heaviness pressed against his chest. His heartbeat stumbled, faster one moment and slower the next. He paused, pressing a hand against his ribs, frowning. Just stress, he told himself. He had been working day and night, ignoring sleep, ignoring meals. He was used to pushing himself too far. But this felt different. His vision blurred, colors melting into shadows. The cars around him seemed to tilt and sway. A drop of sweat rolled down his temple, even though the air was cool. He inhaled sharply, trying to steady himself, but the air felt too thin, like the world was closing in. One more step, he tried. His legs betrayed him, his knees buckled. The mighty William collapsed onto the hard road. His body hit the ground with a sound that seemed to echo in the emptiness of the lot. His cheek pressed against the rough concrete. Dust clung to the crisp fabric of his suit, staining the perfect blue. His phone slipped from his pocket, sliding across the ground, screen glowing faintly. But his hands were too weak to reach for it. His breaths came shallow and uneven, as if every inhale was a battle. He blinked slowly, trying to hold on, but his strength was slipping like sand between his fingers. And yet, no one noticed. A car rolled past, the driver glancing his way, but too distracted to care. A couple laughed together as they walked toward the mall entrance, not even looking down. Life kept moving, the world spinning fast, while William, the man who once controlled companies, signed checks worth millions, and stood at the top of his empire, lay helpless, silent, and unseen. The truth was cruel. Wealth could not help him now. Power could not lift him. Status meant nothing as he lay sprawled in the dust, his body failing him, his lips pale, his eyes dim. Inside his fading mind, fear whispered, "Is this it? Is this how it ends? Alone in a parking lot with no one to care?" The proud man who had dined with presidents and flown in private jets was now just a fragile body on the ground. His heartbeat grew weaker, each thud sounding distant, like a drum fading into the horizon. The silence pressed down heavier than the concrete beneath him. The parking lot felt endless, empty, and merciless. And William realized, for the first time in his life, that he was powerless. But in the distance, though he could not yet see it, hope was on its way. A pair of small eyes had noticed. And soon, a little heart would change everything. A small white car rolled to a stop near the mall entrance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of vanilla from a little air freshener swinging on the mirror. On the back seat sat Alice, a 5-year-old girl with golden hair tied into 2 tiny braids. Her dress was simple but neat, her shoes kicked off, as little girls often do when they're tired of sitting. Her mother turned in the driver's seat and smiled gently. "Sweetheart, I'll be right back. Just a minute, okay? Mommy has to get something from the store." Alice, with her big, trusting eyes, nodded. "Okay, Mommy, I'll wait." Her mother stepped out and walked toward the mall, her footsteps light and hurried. The car was quiet now, the world outside buzzing with life. Alice pressed her small palms against the window, watching people hurry past, carrying bags, talking on phones, laughing as if the world was a happy, safe place. Her lips curled into a tiny smile, but then her gaze froze. Her heart skipped. Across the parking lot, not too far from her car, she saw something strange. A man, a tall man in a beautiful sky blue suit, was lying on the ground, not resting, not moving, just lying there, like a broken doll someone had dropped and forgotten. Alice tilted her head. At first, she thought maybe he was sleeping, but even her 5-year-old heart knew this wasn't right. Adults didn't sleep on the hard, dirty road. Adults didn't look so pale, their chest barely rising and falling. Fear rippled through her little body. Her small hands trembled against the glass. But then, courage bloomed inside her, like a tiny flower breaking through the cracks of stone. He needs help, she thought. He's all alone. Without another second of hesitation, Alice grabbed the car handle and pushed the door open with all her strength. The summer air rushed in. The ground beneath her bare feet was warm, almost hot, but she didn't care. She ran across the parking lot, her little legs moving as fast as they could. Every step echoed in her ears. Her braids bounced, her heart pounded. She didn't look back for her mother. She didn't wait for anyone. When she reached him, she slowed down and dropped to her knees beside the man. His suit was clean but now dusted with dirt, his face pale as chalk, his lips faintly parted. His phone lay just out of reach, screen dim. Alice leaned closer, her breath shaky. She could smell the sharp scent of asphalt mixed with something faintly metallic, his sweat. "Sir, are you okay?" she whispered, her voice softer than the wind. She waited. Nothing. Her little hand hovered above his arm. She wanted to shake him awake, but fear made her hesitate. What if he didn't move? What if he was... She couldn't finish the thought. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. She didn't want to cry. She wanted to be brave. Even at 5 years old, she knew. Sometimes, even small people had to be strong. So she stayed there, bent on her knees, watching him, listening for even the smallest sound from his chest. A billionaire's life was slipping away, and only one tiny angel had stopped to notice. Alice's eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, that could help the silent man lying beside her. Then she noticed it. His phone. It was lying just a few inches from his hand, the sleek screen glowing faintly, waiting for a touch. Her little fingers reached out, trembling as she picked it up. The phone was heavy in her hands, much heavier than her small toy phone at home. She didn't know how to use a grown-up's phone fully, but she saw something on the screen. Emergency call. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought it might burst, but she pressed the button anyway. The numbers, 911, appeared under her tiny fingertips. The phone rang once, twice. Then a calm voice answered, 911, what's your emergency? Alice swallowed hard, her voice shaky. Hello? Please, a man is on the ground. He's not waking up. Please come fast. Her words came out rushed, but her tone carried a courage beyond her age. She was scared, terrified even, but she wouldn't leave him alone. The operator's voice softened. Sweetheart, you're very brave. Can you tell me where you are? Alice looked around quickly. We're at the mall, in the parking lot, near the big doors. Please hurry. You did a wonderful job, the operator assured her. Stay with him. Help is on the way. Alice clutched the phone to her chest, then set it gently beside her. Her knees pressed into the rough ground, scraping against the concrete, but she didn't notice. Her eyes stayed fixed on the man's face, pale and still. She reached out her small hand and placed it gently on his arm. His sleeve felt smooth beneath her fingers, but the skin underneath was frighteningly cold. Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, her little voice trembling yet steady. Don't worry. You're not alone. Someone is coming. For a moment, it looked like nothing changed, but then His chest moved, just a tiny rise and fall. Weak, but there. Alice's heart leapt with hope. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know he was rich or powerful. All she knew was that he was a man who needed her. And in that moment, the fate of a billionaire did not rest in the hands of doctors, lawyers, or bodyguards. It rested in the pure kindness of a 5-year-old girl who refused to walk away. The parking lot was still busy, but it felt as if the whole world had gone quiet around them. Just a man fighting for breath, and a little angel guarding him with courage too big for her tiny frame. The sound of faint sirens finally echoed in the distance, growing louder with every second. Alice's eyes filled with relief. Help was truly coming. She didn't move. She didn't run. She stayed kneeling beside him, her hand still resting on his arm, whispering again, "You're not alone. I promise." The faint sound of sirens grew louder and louder, echoing through the wide parking lot like a promise of hope. Alice's little heart thumped as she looked toward the mall entrance. Flashing red and white lights soon cut across the afternoon sun, and the sharp screech of brakes made her flinch. The ambulance had arrived. 2 paramedics jumped out, pushing a stretcher between them. Their steps were quick, their faces sharp with focus. The moment they spotted the man in the sky-blue suit lying on the ground, they rushed forward. Alice scooted back just a little, giving them space, but her wide eyes never left William's pale face. She clutched her dress tightly in her tiny fists, praying silently in the only way a 5-year-old could. The paramedics knelt beside William, checking his pulse, shining a small light into his eyes. One of them said firmly, "We've got him. Stay calm." His tone was steady, but even he looked surprised at how close the man had been to losing consciousness completely. "Stretcher, quick!" the other paramedic ordered. They carefully lifted William's limp body with practiced hands, laying him gently onto the stretcher. His head rolled slightly, his skin still ghostly pale. Machines beeped as they strapped him in and checked his vitals. For a brief moment, one paramedic looked around the lot and asked aloud, "Who called this in?" Silence. People nearby shifted awkwardly, glancing at one another, and then a small, delicate hand rose bravely into the air. Alice. Her braids swayed as she stood on her little knees, her voice soft but certain. "I did." Both paramedics froze for a second, staring at the tiny girl. One of them blinked, clearly moved. "You? You called?" She nodded, her cheeks pink, her eyes still glistening with fear and hope. The 2 grown men exchanged looks of amazement. A billionaire's life, saved not by his wealth or connections, but by a child barely tall enough to reach the phone in her small hands. Before they could even thank her, a woman's scream cut through the air. "Alice!" It was her mother, rushing out of the mall with shopping bags falling from her arms. Her face turned pale as she saw her little girl standing by the stretcher, so close to the man who was being loaded into the ambulance. Her heart nearly stopped. She ran forward, dropping everything, pulling Alice into her arms. "Oh, sweetheart, what are you doing? You scared me!" But as the paramedics explained, her tears changed from fear to pride. "Your daughter is the reason this man is alive," one of them said quietly. "She called us. She stayed with him until we got here." Alice's mother froze, her mouth parting in shock. She looked down at her tiny daughter, the same little girl she had just asked to wait quietly in the car. And here she was, braver than most adults, saving a stranger's life. Tears blurred her vision. She hugged Alice tighter, pressing her cheek against her daughter's soft hair. "Oh, my brave girl," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so proud of you." Alice, still clutching her mother's dress, glanced back at the stretcher where William lay, breathing faintly but alive. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I didn't want him to be alone." And in that moment, every heart nearby understood the courage of a little child had rewritten fate. The hospital room was quiet, the soft beeping of machines breaking the silence. White walls surrounded William, the powerful billionaire who had always believed he was unshakable. For hours he had drifted in darkness, his mind lost between dreams and shadows. And then slowly he opened his eyes. The first thing he felt wasn't the cold sheets or the weight of the IV needle in his arm. It was a memory so soft yet so powerful, a tiny hand resting on his sleeve, and a child's trembling voice whispering, "Don't worry, you're not alone." His chest tightened, not with pain this time, but with emotion. He had never in his life felt such purity, such innocence, such comfort. A nurse noticed his eyes flutter open and quickly called for the doctors. They gathered around, checking his vitals, asking him to breathe deeply. Relief spread across their faces. "You're stable now," one doctor said warmly. "You're lucky, very lucky." William, still weak, managed to ask, How did I get here?" The doctor looked at him with a strange smile. "A little girl called 911. She stayed by your side until help arrived. Without her, sir, things could have been much worse." The words hit William harder than any illness ever could. A little girl, a child had been his lifeline. His throat grew tight, his eyes burning with emotions he couldn't name. For the first time in years, he felt small, not because of weakness, but because of awe. Hours passed, and the evening sun cast golden stripes through the blinds when the door slowly opened. William turned his head, expecting perhaps a nurse, but instead, he saw her. Alice. Her little frame appeared in the doorway, holding her mother's hand. She wore the same simple dress as before, her braids neat, her eyes big and innocent. She stepped into the room carefully, almost shy, her shoes tapping softly against the hospital floor. William's breath caught. This was the angel who had saved him. He tried to sit up straighter, but his body still felt weak. Yet his heart grew stronger just seeing her. He gestured gently. "Come closer." Alice hesitated, her little fingers gripping her mother's hand tighter. But then, encouraged by her mother's smile, she walked forward. Each step felt like a miracle. When she reached his bedside, William slowly lowered himself so he could be closer to her height. His powerful frame, usually towering above everyone, now bent low in respect to a child. His eyes glistened, his voice heavy with emotion. "Alice," he whispered, his voice breaking, "you are my angel. You saved me. I owe you everything." The room seemed to grow still, every sound fading. The billionaire, who had once ruled boardrooms, now knelt in front of a 5-year-old, humbled by her courage. Alice looked at him, her cheeks pink, and smiled shyly. "I just didn't want you to be alone." Those simple words struck him deeper than any speech ever could. His throat tightened, his chest ached, not from sickness, but from the weight of a lesson he had forgotten. All his wealth, all his business empires, all his power. And yet, in the moment that mattered most, it was a child's pure kindness that gave him life again. Tears shimmered in his eyes, but he didn't hide them. For the first time in years, William allowed his heart to show. He gently reached out, resting his large hand over her tiny one. "Alice, you've given me something no money can buy. You've given me hope." Alice's mother watched silently, her eyes filled with emotion. She had never seen such gratitude in a man's eyes, especially one who clearly carried the weight of wealth and status. And yet here he was, kneeling before her daughter, changed forever by the bravery of a child. In that quiet hospital room, two worlds met, the world of power and wealth and the world of innocence and love. And in the middle stood a bond that nothing could ever break. Life after that day was never the same, for William, for Alice, and even for her mother. William had built empires. He had bought companies, towers, lands, and even respect with his wealth. But for the first time in his 35 years, he understood that money could not buy the most precious gift in life: human kindness. So he made a quiet promise to himself as he lay in that hospital bed. "I will never forget this little girl. I will never let her down." And he kept that promise. From that day forward, William stayed close to Alice and her mother. Not as a man showing off his wealth, but as a man full of gratitude. He visited them often, sometimes with gifts, but more often just with his time. He sat on the floor and played with Alice's dolls. He let her braid his hair with pink ribbons, laughing in ways no one in his boardroom had ever seen. Alice's mother at first felt shy. She was just an ordinary woman raising her little girl, far from the glittering world of billionaires. But William treated her with respect. He never flaunted his riches. Instead, he brought groceries quietly, paid bills secretly, and when Alice needed school supplies, he made sure she had the best, not to spoil her, but to secure her future. One day, he invited Alice and her mother to his company's headquarters. The grand building rose into the sky, walls of glass reflecting the sun. Workers in suits bustled around, whispering curiously when they saw the powerful CEO walking hand in hand with a little girl. William gathered his staff, his voice steady but emotional. "This child," he said, placing his hand gently on Alice's shoulder, "is the reason I am alive. Remember her face. Remember her courage. She saved me when none of you could. She reminded me that no matter how rich or powerful we are nothing without compassion." His words spread across the company like fire, and soon, like ripples, they spread beyond it. People whispered about the little girl who saved the billionaire, not as news or gossip, but as a quiet reminder of humanity. But the biggest change was inside William himself. He no longer rushed through life chasing deals and contracts. He no longer thought of people as numbers or workers. He started seeing them as lives, hearts, and families. He slowed down. He smiled more. He gave more, not for recognition, but because he had learned what love really meant. And every time he looked at Alice, he saw not just the girl who saved him, but the angel who saved his soul. Alice was only 5 years old, yet her heart was bigger than skyscrapers, stronger than bank accounts, and purer than diamonds. She had taught a man with billions that life's real treasure was kindness. For society, her lesson was simple but eternal. Sometimes the smallest heart can perform the greatest miracles. It didn't matter that she was a child. It didn't matter that she had no money, no power, no voice in the world of adults. What mattered was her courage, her compassion, and her refusal to walk away. Alice, just 5 years old, reminded everyone that compassion has no age, no class, and no limits. And so, in the quiet bond between a billionaire and a little girl, the world learned something priceless. We rise not by wealth, but by lifting others with love.